Hey, readers and writers. So we started off class today with sharing some of the revisions that you've started making and sharing information about your stories. Thank you so much for sharing. I cannot wait to see how these stories continue to shape. Again, I like to think of these stories as kind of a lump of clay. So what you wrote in your draft, that's your clay, that's your material. And then as we work through these revisions, what we're doing is shaping that clay into something outstanding. So that's what this revision process is for. I can't wait to see what shape your stories take. So we are studying a mentor text. My teacher is an alien. And as we discussed yesterday, a mentor text is a text that readers can return to and reread for many different purposes. So they're meant to be studied and they're meant to be imitated. So we've already read through once to enjoy the story. So what we're doing now is taking a look at important pieces of the story to study the author's craft, to study how he did what he did, how Bruce Coville took his clay and he shaped it into something wonderful. So yesterday we studied character descriptions. Today we're going to be taking a look at some key scenes. So we know in My Teacher is an Alien, the topic is alien abductions. Of course, that's what he kind of centered his story around. Our protagonist, as we discussed yesterday, we've got Susan and Peter. We've got our antagonist, Bruxum. And then today we're going to talk about the conflict in a little more detail. We know that, of course, in the conflict, it's character versus character. Bruxum has kidnapped Miss Schwartz and is planning to abduct students. Let me move. I was on the other screen. I'll move myself over here so you can see me. We know that he has kidnapped Miss Schwartz and he's planning to abduct students in the 6th grade class. So Peter and Susan must work to unmask him and to save their school and their teacher. So we know that that kind of unfolds in a series of events. So we're going to talk about those events today. But eventually, the way that story is solved is when Peter and Susan, well, they spend the whole book finding a way to unmask Bruxum. Then at the band concert at the end, they drive him crazy with the sound of their instruments, which forces him to take off his mask in front of everyone. Bruxum leaves Earth and Peter goes with him. So what I want you to do is take a moment to think about that main conflict, because we know it's not just boom, conflict, boom, resolution. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a story, or the story would be one page. There's a series of events, key events that kind of unfold. So I want you to think through right now. What is the first thing that happens to show us that Bruxum is actually an alien? So what is the first key event that you think is the first thing to really bring this conflict to a head? So let's pause the video and let's hear some of your ideas. Awesome. So thank you so much for sharing. There are a bunch of events that we could pick from. There are some leading up events, but I would argue that the main event that really shows us Bruxum is an alien is when Susan writes a note about Mr. Smith. He then collects it and she goes to his house. Then she sees him take off his face. That is when things really, the story gets rolling, because now she's got to go talk to Peter. They've got to start working to solve this together. So that is really what introduces the conflict. So let's read about it. This happens in chapter 4. So what we're going to do is open up to chapter 4. And we're going to reread this part where the conflict is introduced. Now remember, we're not just reading to enjoy the story anymore. We're reading to study what Bruce Coville does. How does he take his clay and how does he build conflict into it? How does he shape it into something entertaining and something worth reading? So what I want you to do is think about, as we read, how does Bruce Coville introduce the conflict? What descriptions does he add? Then after we talk about that, I'll be asking you to think, how will you introduce your conflict? So chapter 4, page 23, Bruxum. The door was unlocked. Trying not to make any noise, I turned the knob and pushed. The door opened without a sound. I hesitated for just a moment, then stepped in. I was standing in a hallway. To my left, I saw an empty living room, and I do mean empty, except for curtains. There wasn't one bit of furniture or decoration in the room. The walls and floor were totally bare. I flinched as another burst of horrible squawking and growling sounded above me. Taking a deep breath, I began to tiptoe up the stairs. I was glad I was wearing sneakers. About halfway up, I stopped and thought, what am I doing? I should get out of here while I can. You may not believe this, but the only reason I didn't turn back was that I thought Mr. Smith might really be in trouble. Even though I didn't like the man, I didn't want anything horrible to happen to him. So I swallowed and took another step. The noise stopped. Was everything over? Would Mr. Smith start down the stairs and find me standing here? I was just about to turn and run when another round of squawking and shrieking made it clear that whatever was happening was still going on. I still wanted to run, but I was afraid to. Afraid that if I did, I might read in the paper the next day that something terrible had happened to Mr. Smith. Something I could have prevented. Of course, I was afraid to keep going, but I decided I didn't have any choice. I took another step and then another. I held on to the railings as if it was a lifeline. The knot in my stomach got tighter with every step I took. When I got near the top, I lay down on my stomach. I had read somewhere that when you're peering around a corner, you're less likely to be seen if your head is low. So I kept my head as low as possible. If I could have pulled out one eye and just stuck it around the corner to take a peek, that would have been fine with me. The hall was as empty as the living room. No pictures on the walls, no rug on the floor. Through an open door at the end of the hall, I could see a small blue bathroom. Closer to me on the right was another open door. The horrible sound seemed to be coming from there. I decided low was the way to go. Still on my belly, I slithered down one side of the hall until I had reached the doorway. I shivered. That noise was like a tiger running its claws down a blackboard. It felt like aluminum foil against my teeth. What could be making it? When I finally got up the nerve to sneak a look around the bottom edge of the door, I saw Mr. Smith sitting at a little makeup table, looking in a mirror. Stacy was right. The man really was handsome. He had a long, lean face with a square jaw, a straight nose, and cheekbones to die for. Only, it was a fake. As I watched, Mr. Smith pressed his fingers against the bottom of his eyes. Suddenly, he ran his fingertips to the sides of his head, grabbed his ears, and started peeling off his face. I gasped. Fortunately, the horrible noises coming from the room drowned it out. I wanted to get up and run, but I was too terrified to move. I started to shake instead. Whatever Mr. Smith was, I was pretty sure the face he was slowly uncovering wasn't anything that had been born on Earth. As he stripped away the mask, I could see that he had skin the color of limes. His enormous orange eyes slanted up and away from his nose like a pair of butterfly wings. A series of muscular-looking ridges stretched from his eyes down to his lipless mouth. Soon, the handsome face of Mr. Smith was lying on the dressing table. The creature that had been hidden underneath it began to massage his face. "Ah," he said, "what a relief." He smiled at himself in the mirror, showing 2 rows of rounded, purplish teeth. I had noticed that the horrible noise was coming from a pair of flat pieces of plastic hanging on the wall. But it wasn't until Mr. Smith started singing, along with the sounds, that I realized the plastic sheets were speakers. That hideous sound was music, or at least what passed for music wherever my alien teacher had come from. I was still trying to find the courage to start backing up when the alien turned down the music and flipped a switch on the table. The mirror began to shimmer. Suddenly, the image of Mr. Smith was replaced by another alien face, this one just as horrible. Beyond the face, I could see a big room with other aliens bustling around. From the look of things, I figured this must be a spaceship. The face in the mirror said something that sounded like "Inger, zinger." These words were low and growly. "Wroxham reporting," said Mr. Smith. The face in the mirror made some growly noises. "It is good to hear our mother tongue," said Mr. Smith, or Wroxham, or whatever his name was. "I cannot wait to return to the ship and have this language implant removed so I can speak the true tongue and not this barbaric garble." Hey, I thought, whose language are you calling barbaric? But before I got too angry, I heard something else, something that sent a cold chill down my spine. "The testing process is proceeding on schedule," said Wroxham. "Before long, I will have selected the students I wish to bring back for study." Bring back for study? I couldn't believe my ears. My teacher was an alien. Even worse, he had come to Earth to kidnap kids and take them into space. So let's pause and chat. How does Bruce Coville introduce the conflict? What descriptions does he add? Let's talk. Awesome. So we noticed a lot. So this chapter is pretty short. 5 or 6 pages. But when we take a look at it, we notice that a lot of it is inner thought because Susan is alone observing. She's sneaking in, she's peering around a corner. So we get a lot of her observations through her thinking, and we get a lot of what she's thinking. For example, on page 24, what am I doing? I should get out of here while I can. So we know what's going through her head. This chapter really slowed down too. We get her every move walking through this door. And right from the beginning, I turned the knob, I pushed, I opened, not a sound. I hesitated, I stepped in. So it's really slowed down to build anticipation, which is really cool. Also, when she's peering around the corner, we get a whole page on descriptions, totally describing what he looked like and the process of taking this mask off. Ran his fingertips into the side of his head, grabbed his ears, started peeling off the face. I gasped, right? There's some really good descriptions in here. And then we get exactly what he looks like. Series of enormous orange eyes slanted up away from his nose like a pair of butterfly wings. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And then the end of this chapter sets the conflict. My teacher was an alien. Even worse, he had come to Earth to kidnap kids and take them into space. So the way that Bruce Coville crafted that chapter is just absolutely incredible, between the pacing, the speed that he writes it, by slowing it down, the descriptions, and that clear establishment of a conflict. So guess what you're going to do today with your revisions? So I want you to think, what are you going to do in your story today to make sure that your conflict is clearly established? So I want you to go through your story, think about it in your head. You don't have to pull it open right now because that's what your writing time is for, but I want you to think about it. What have I written about my conflict? Do I have a clear conflict? What will I do today to take my clay and to shape it? So let's pause and let's set a timer. Excellent. So then we will share some of this fabulous work that you have done tomorrow. So we've got a couple of assignments. You're going to have a short passage, and then you're going to have questions about conflict. So the passage you're going to read, again, it's super short. You're just going to describe the conflict and describe how the author wrote it. Then, of course, today in your writing, you're going to be making revisions to your conflict. So that's going to be your focus today. So I can't wait to see the changes that we make, and to see how these stories continue to take shape. Happy reading, happy writing.